Okay, I'll go ahead and get started here. Sarah will be here in a few minutes, but just a reminder, Porter is a CNCF project and we do abide by the CNCF Code of Conduct, which I will drop into the chat. Should have had this ready, but here we go. Just takes a second. Okay, let me mute my texts that are coming through right now. Okay. Well, then there's Sarah as well, but let's go ahead and just get started. I guess I'll just run the meeting today. There's a couple of things on the agenda first off that I kind of wanted to maybe wait until Kim got here to talk about, because he was definitely more versed in those discussions. So just before we hop into the agenda, is there anything that anyone wants to just bring up off the bat to talk about?
Hi, it's me.
Hey.
We are going to start 1.2.0 planning, which June, July, August. We're gonna cut to release November because KubeCon. If there are issues you would like in the 1.2.0 or you think you will do between now and 1.2.0, please let me know. We can make like a label. We have a project board already, throw it in there. And we'll cover the questions, and if we have time at the end of this meeting, we can start like triaging issues for 1.2.0, but we can also just do it next meeting.
Hey, hold on. I'm trying to silence my notifications because I'm getting bombarded with messages right now. Okay. Sounds good. Okay, so one of the things that I brought up previously, and I wasn't even here to talk about it, but we got two issues with our storage plugins. So number one, we're on like a really old version of the Mongo SDK. I think we're like in a 4. And so we need to update that. And Kim was looking at that, and it sounds like, and I want him to kind of talk about this when he shows up, but it sounds like it's not that big of a deal, but the problem will be migration. And this is a bigger issue that we kind of want to think about, where the way that the storage stuff is set up now, it could be pretty easy, unless I'm not sure about a feature of Porter, but it could be really easy to totally orphan all your installations and all your Porter backend storage stuff if you go from one cluster or one database to another. And we don't have a nice way to migrate that other than just like doing a dump of one database and an import into the other database. Is that our recommended data migration path, or do we want to have a migration flow in Porter itself where we can take things from one database to another? What's the thoughts on that?
I think Kim touched base on like we could have like a migration path where we go from like major version to major version. That's kind of gonna not be super fun to implement as like a feature, but it's not the worst thing in the world to do these like slow rolling upgrades and wait for like a migration to completely happen. And I wonder how much of like the Mongo SDK we could consume to like handle most of this for us.
I know that there was a data migration. If you actually do porter store or porter data migrate, I think is the command. There is a data migration command right now, but that was a migration from a breaking change of the schema to a new version of the schema. So it's kind of not great. I think it should be maybe Porter data schema migrate or Porter schema, like, because it's definitely not. I think it's Porter storage migrate is what it is. And it's not great. So we might want, that was like from when we went to 0.38 to 1.0 pre-release. So maybe we should add in another command for managing the real migration, not schema related migrations.
Yeah, I think that's a good feature request. I think it should be done within the scope of U1.2, 1.2.0. I don't even know like how difficult, but there has to be prior art that we could leverage on this. And even if we just do it super slow, that we do it to like 5, and then like in minor releases, we just like slowly start like pushing people. As long as there's pinned releases of like each version of Mongo they can migrate to, then that's fine, if that makes sense. Because then they can slowly upgrade themselves.
Yeah. And then, and maybe Troy or you guys might have talked to this a little bit more, but what the possibility of adding in additional storage backends was something I had talked about, and I couldn't get the meeting last week. Is that something we want to try to target for 1.2, or is that a longer term? I don't know that we have the bandwidth to try to get like a SQL or some other backing store integrated, or if we care to.
I think it's valid. I think we already have like a storage interface that we could use for this.
It's heavily Mongo influenced.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be trivial to kind of rip out the Mongo assumptions from there and add in a new backend.
Oh, I know this. I remember now. This was like something I wanted to start doing the first time. I don't know. I think this is out of scope for 1.2, but it is something that's needed, and I think there's already an issue for it.
Okay.
Is there an issue for it? Can we make an issue for it?
I'll check that after.
Or I'll check it now since we're in the call. That way you don't have to worry about it. Let's see, storage. Yeah, because the goal was that there's not like, you know, you be able to use your own like managed database service instead of just like having to find each cloud provider's managed database service that like is a NoSQL one. And we were able to find one in AWS last time.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I mean, we were trying to figure out like what's the AWS equivalent for the Cosmos DB with the Mongo API interface on it.
Is Cosmos DB the Azure one?
Yeah, the Mongo API, which is what we're using.
Uh-huh.
But we have that security thing that we talked about later. Probably the secure, like finding some way to secure the secrets is maybe higher priority because, like you said, I guess we learned that different storage backends might be challenging. It sounds like potentially, but as long as it can be secure, like from our point of view, specifically to Azure, there is support for a Mongo API, so that actually works fine. You know, it's just that we have to secure the secrets for the connection. Yep. And actually, I think Steve, you put something. Was that you put it? I didn't investigate.
Yeah. That should already be supported. So when Porter does its resolving of its config, like if you can put things in your config that reference a secret.
Yeah.
And it'll use the secret backend in the config to resolve that secret and inject it at runtime.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to investigate that. I was going to look at it. I think the ideal, you know, from the Azure point of view, the ideal is to use managed identity. In some scenarios, they might allow you to use. I mean, really, I think it's in order of the other options. Perhaps as a second choice might be a certificate, but it would have to be auto rotated on a regular basis.
I think managed identities is the right way to do it in Azure, at least, right?
Yeah, in Azure. But I want to investigate what you shared because I wanted to try and see exactly what it did and see if that's like for us, if that's okay in the short term. But yeah, I think for other, if there was some answer for the pain point that we had, but also for others on AWS or wherever where they may have the concern about security, if there was an answer to that, that might be even a higher priority than a different storage backend. Like, because I think Mongo API probably is reasonable. Like the original decision, it's supported on all the different clouds and so on. It's probably reasonable from that point of view to support that as the main API.
Yeah, this looks like I mean, we have a PEP or something that needs a PEP to add something for like managed identity. And I think this is reasonable. I want to, before we go too far, I know David has his class coming up, so I wanted to touch base and give him space to like talk through your two issues really quick.
Cool. Yeah, sure. They're the lower down ones on the agenda. Apologies, I've got a few of them. So just before 1.1, we'd done a little bit of work about Mixin versions and being able to specify in your porter YAML which version of the Mixin you want to run. And we were just having a bit of back and forth on would that break existing Mixins? What should we do about it? That sort of thing. So the PR is still just there. And we said, do you know what? Let's wait for 1.1. Let's talk about this afterwards. So it's afterwards, was all I was thinking. There is a link to it. Get for you guys.
Thank you.
If my laptop will play ball. It does not like this HackMD page at all.
Yeah, I always have trouble copying.
Yeah, I'm just going to go to GitHub. Bear with me.
You're good, you're good.
So do we need to dig into this more? And is there anything to talk about for this PR now, or are we just wanting to say like, hey, let's revisit this, let's start reviewing it and get it merged in?
Yeah, it was basically, should we think about this for 1.2? Should we, is it because we can't agree on it, we just pause it indefinitely? Impartial.
Okay, now look at it. Yep.
So this won't break any of the current behavior where you don't have to specify a version and it still works out of the box with some native version, I'm assuming, and
whatever's installed.
Yeah. So if you just use porter mixin install foo or whatever the command is, it'll install it at the name. And then if you're using the versioned inside of the porter.yaml, it'll install it with the mixin name and version combo so that it can resolve it at build time.
No, it was just linting. So if whatever you've got installed currently needs to match what's defined in your porter YAML was sort of step one.
Oh, this is just the linter to make sure that the versions are compatible.
Yeah, so but it's in the same way, if you try and build, I'm pretty sure it runs the lint as well. So it would block you from building if you added this field in and it didn't match the version you had installed.
Okay, so this isn't changing anything on how the actual install part works.
No. There was an attempt at sort of thinking about that, but we immediately got side railed into, well, wouldn't it be nice if Porter just installed the mixins for you? And then we just spiraled and spiraled and spiraled.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you can have two versions of the same mixin at the same time. So it would brick other things if a new one did it. And yeah, it'll no fun.
Okay, so this is purely in the scope of just the versioning then.
I think it was just an issue, I want to say Kim raised, saying that if a mixin uses this field for something else, for whatever they want, we will start parsing it as our own and breaking their mixin.
That's true.
Which is a valid point.
Yeah, that's a really valid point.
There's no way to sort of predefine what are our fields and what are theirs.
Like in the Terraform mixin, I think we call it client version. But you know, there's nothing that in a spec that says you have to have this, right?
Yeah, and I think traditionally what we did is those fields would generate into the JSON file, and that's how we would track them. Like that's how like porter fields would be that aren't like user specified, and they would be internal to the code base. So, okay. I mean, I do think it's within the, I should open up more links. I do think it's within the realm of 120. But just to call back that this version, so there's a couple of different versions. In the Mixin client version is supposed to be the client of the Mixin we're downloading, right? And then that kind of gets confused with this version here, which is the version of the Mixin we have locally. So yeah. All right, let's slate it.
Yeah, I definitely
Waste
think
the
this.
entire meeting.
Okay. Do you have another one that you want to touch on, David?
Yeah, sorry, I've got two more because I'm greedy.
Yeah, you're all good. Love it.
Cool. Hackady's decided it's going to reload the entire page. Amazing. Camera. Cool. Okay. So one of the things I noticed from the podcast was that a lot of our examples were referencing images which no longer run. There are some Docker images that are using the V1 manifest. So if you try and run them, it just blows up and says no. An example is the whale say one that's in quite a lot of our examples. There's been an issue open for about 7 years on the GitHub repo for this, trying to get them to update it, and they just haven't. People have tweeted them. I don't think they're going to. We should probably just fork that and publish it somewhere we can use it and just update those references. Seems to be the simplest solution. Unless anyone has any other ideas, but I didn't know if we had a place that we store example OCI images.
We do have our own like container registry that we could throw things up in. And we can create like a permission for you. Like I think release admins, that permission like gives you like push ability to that container registry. And I think it'd be fine to store it there. Stephen, do you have like a specific spot?
That's the right, I think that's the right spot.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and so David, do you want to own that? Or are you comfortable owning that?
Yeah, no, I raised the issue, so there is an issue for it somewhere. I tried to put it in that HackMD space, but it's not playing ball. Yeah. There was also a note whilst doing this. There are lots of images that are also in Carolyn's personal Docker space.
Yeah.
They still work for the moment, so happy to just leave them be. But if we're going through and doing this, did we just go, do you know what, let's tick stuff through and have a porter space for images and just professionalize it a little bit? Because if I'm updating the docs for one thing, I can update it for all.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add this. I'm going to update your issue. You're going to give David access to migrate container images to the getporter. And then move everything under. Yeah, I'm on board with that. I've commented on it. I'm gonna make sure that the access has that push stuff, and then you should be good to go.
Perfect. Cool. And then one more, sorry, super greedy. We were talking about the open tofu Mixin. So I familiarized myself with the Terraform one. Looks fairly simple, understand what's going on. The big question is, do we just fork the Terraform one? We have two separate mixins. They're entirely separate. They live their own lives. Or do we try and do something clever where the Terraform one can build both?
Nah, don't be smart about it. Don't be smart about it. Yeah, I just clone the Terraform one, and I have one like halfway done where I just like went and I find and replace all of the HashiCorp Terraform to OpenTofu. Just changed the like wget that we call to like call the proper repository, and it should be fine.
Cool. So doing that, would someone be able to make me a top level within getporter OpenTofu mixin space? And then I can just, yeah, even if it's just got a readme in or whatever, I can, smash everything in from there.
Steven, can you make the repo, and I'm gonna get him release access so that he can move the container images?
Do we not have that repo?
Nope, it don't exist.
Okay, I'll just.
Okay.
There is a feature that I've almost done with, but I keep forgetting to come back to, and that's at the bottom of the list here, that also will need to go into OpenTofu because it's in the Terraform mixin. Let's see. Okay, all right, I created the OpenTofu. Oh, hold on.
You could just clone. Can you create that and then clone like copy the Terraform one, and then there all you have to do is just rename it, and then he can just push and set everything?
I could do that. Yes.
Can you just do like all that work? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Just do it. Just do it, Steve.
Yeah, and then actually just do the sed too, and then like update the tests and like
sure.
Yeah. No problem.
Yeah, I made the wrong OpenTofu one anyway, so don't use the one I just made. Just forget I did that. Let's see here.
Cool. I'm gonna add you to this. All right, David, anything else?
I guess just a question. If we're pushing stuff into a registry and I get permission, is there somewhere we should be storing the Docker files for the things and doing like some CI/CD stuff and making it all clever? Or because this stuff is just going to be static, do I just one-shot tag it and push it?
I mean, I'd like for it to be clever. I just don't know. Like, if that is something you want to do, yep, go do it. Like, go have fun. It's open source project, so if you want to go like build out like workflows, CI pipelines, it'd be cool to update examples. That's kind of where I'm going. Like, if examples had like an actions workflow that like went and like built the images like monthly or whatever, and like made sure that they like actually run, that'd be sick. But like just getting examples up to date in the year of like 2024, that'd be also great.
Maybe follow up then. Maybe I'll get something working first and then put an issue to professionalize later.
Yep. Cool. Okay.
Cool.
Sarah.
Also, I feel really bad. I don't have to dash off.
You're good.
So
got all your things done. Awesome. Thank you.
Oh no, sorry. I was saying I don't have to.
You don't have to?
So
your yoga
made you speed run all of my items.
I was like so excited. Oh, well, no yoga for you today. What's up, Steven?
Sarah, with the OpenTofu mixin, I've not gone through the mixin release process and getting that up to the feed. Do you know how that process works?
I think it's magic. I know.
I don't believe in magic.
I know the mage file. Like if you have what I've been doing, but when I broke Porter releases, when I moved us to actions, what I did was I'd create a GitHub token, have it locally stored, and then I'd run one of the mage commands, and then like that would do it. No idea how that works because like all of our mage repos are like nested in other stuff. We should really hunt that down and figure out how to do that. Kim, do you know?
I think it will just work now. At least the canary ones are added to the feed automatically now. It just needs to, I just think the names needs to be correct.
Yep.
And it should Like there is a name somewhere in some, probably in one of the files that needs to be updated for it to not think it's the Terraform one. But I know it when I see it because I fought with it for a while.
By the way, we just HackMD issue where we can no longer edit the document. So
we can't.
no,
It's too long.
too long. So
What?
I'll go through and archive some of the older notes.
Too long.
Let me save off some of the bottom stuff, and then I'll get that archived.
This HackMD started in 2020, just for everyone to go. Just to understand. Wow.
I'm gonna save off at least the 2020 ones right now so that we can.
Yeah, I should read some of these.
Okay,
that's crazy.
Now we should be able to change some stuff.
Thank you. Okay, where were we? Publishing to Mixin. We can figure out how to do that.
Yes, I can take a look at that. I just have to find the right place. It should, everything should work now if we get the right name.
I'm going to look into how to publish. Okay. Okay. Cool. Who's up next?
Did we want to circle back to Kim? You said you had a couple things that you want to talk to. We talked about the Mongo stuff, but I'd love to actually have your discussion on it.
Yes, yeah, Mongo was one of them. I don't know what you talked about, of course, but we're just so far behind. It's a little complex to upgrade, right?
Right.
And of course, we have always said you should not use this for production purposes, which you could put as an argument for not doing anything, but it also breaks a lot of things. And if we want to update it more regularly, it will become a challenge in the future too.
Have we tried running it with the newest Mongo? Like, does it work?
Yeah, it seems to work. I've tried it, but if it will fail silently, if you have if you have some storage with the old version and we just update, it will just fail silently because we are waiting for the Docker container to be up and running, and that one will fail. And then we will just be waiting and saying the container didn't start. So it's fairly hidden. It took me a while to figure it out. Why suddenly something just didn't start? But it is because the container fails to start up, because it complains that, well, the data format is too old, basically. So I would say either that one needs to be improved so people actually know what's going wrong, or we can try and handle migration, which is a little cumbersome because we're so far behind. It will, of course, be easier with newer versions, but then we have the whole back and forth. What if they want to downgrade, and a lot of other fun things.
So we talked, and I need to look at this. My hope was that Mongo SDK can handle some of this for us. Hopefully there's I can pass in a schema and it moves it to a certain version. They have migration paths for us already fleshed out, which means we basically just need to add a CLI. If we want to do this right, that's how I should preface this. If we want to do this right, we would add a CLI flag that handles these slow rolling migrations that the user can specify version to version, and we pass that in. I don't even know if that's possible. I haven't looked at the Mongo SDK. I'm just hoping. I'm full of hope now.
So it should be possible. So the process is you have to upgrade to the next version, and then you run a db something command. Cannot remember what is changing the data storage version to whatever you're running now, and then it will work. So the next version will always support the previous version as a data format, but doesn't force you to migrate that data format. You have to say now you migrate to the new data format, and then you're ready for the next one.
Okay.
Which is why it's currently is a long step if you want to upgrade from 4.0 or whatever it was to 7 or something like that, because you have to go through four different versions or something like that in order to update. You cannot update from 4 to 7 in one go. You have to go through the other steps.
Yeah.
But I think it's worth it, right? Long term, at least, to provide a friendly way of doing this. But it's also a lot of complexity because we need to figure out what version they're actually running.
Okay. Yeah. So we'd have to be up and running. We'd have to be able to query to get current version.
Yes.
And then we'd have to do major steps. And you would want to copy, validate, then migrate.
Yeah. There's
Okay.
But also be able to roll back.
Yeah. Well, that's the next part, right?
Okay.
I think that's where all the complexity comes, right? There can be a lot of combinations in this.
Yeah.
Well, we need to like specify something with some guardrails. I think we need to provide a migration path. And then I think we can cover our butts with some good documentation of like, or like, and when I say good documentation, maybe that goes hand in hand with some like good tests. And so if we're able to do like intag and like those types of like tests and say like, hey, we've tested this, this is how we do it. Here's how you can migrate.
Yes.
So like three-pronged approach, right? One is a migration path, but understanding that like it's going to be very prescriptive, so that we don't overburden ourselves. Then it's integration tests, then it's documentation. And then on 1.2.0, we can cut ourselves over to, I don't know, whatever version like supports us the best. And so we aren't leaving our users hanging, but we also aren't like trying to like handhold them, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Is this something we want to get into 1.2?
Do we feel like it's feasible? I feel like November's so far away, but every time I do this, I'm like, oh my God, it's that month again.
Summer holidays, right?
I know. Well, I'm hoping that like if KubeCon does like PR stuff, so I was like, if we can have like a major release near KubeCon, like we can like generate some hype around it and like get people to like test and stuff like that. So or like get featured in like a news stack article. That'd be cool. I'd be so excited. Anyways, so that's the goal. So November, I feel like let's slate it because I feel like it's a big issue. And then if it doesn't happen, we can roll it. I think looping back on the managed identity stuff, I think that would be a sick feature. Like we've been doing a lot of more like security work with the signing and the SBOMs. If we were able to add managed identity as like something we have, it would really help with that production ready type of like use case, right? So I'm going to add that really super old issue into 1.2.0 as well, if anyone wants to grab it. And also, just for context here, I think, oh, go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, sorry. So you're just talking about support for managed identity in general. So there's an existing issue for that, sir?
Yeah, I'll repost it in the Zoom chat right here. So, and I'm going to give a little bit of background.
Yeah.
What would need changed for this? And I'll post the like relevant links. We should be I'm gonna knock on wood here, forking CNAB into Porter to archive CNAB so that we can maintain CNAB. We rely on it so desperately. But you would be able to make the changes that were similar to like the dependency v2 PR, where we like added like fields in the schema for Porter, and add this like what is called out in this claim here, because that right there, like this first code block is in the bundle JSON, right? And if you're able to add this, then I think all you would need to do then is add a new field to the config toml, which Tim just did recently in his signed work. So like there's a lot of like pre-existing art for how to do this. And then the authentication itself could go through secrets. I don't know much about managed identity stuff. So like, Stephen, what do you think?
Yeah, no, the managed identity, there's an SDK from Azure called default credential, what is it? Get default credential, but it does like this fall through for authenticating against AAD. And I'm trying to think on how we would, like, you would need to authenticate the storage plugin, but using the get default credential thing. I'd have to dig into how that code flows. I've done this like 6 different times in different languages, but I haven't, because like the actual fetching of the secret is coming from the Mixin or from the plugin, which is its own, like that's running in the gRPC service, right? So we would need, or it's running as via gRPC, if I remember correctly. So that's the thing that would have to authenticate as the managed identity. I'll take a look, unless Kurt, if you're more familiar with some of this internals, you know, feel free, otherwise I can.
Well, maybe not, but I was just trying to clarify. I don't see in this issue, it's not specific to storage. I think this is broader than storage, right? Although it could apply to storage plugin. Is that the case?
This is identity for plugins, or this is the way I'm reading it is.
Oh, identity for plugins. It is
because we could do the same thing. I think the Azure plugin, or the Azure Secrets plugin already uses managed identities to authenticate.
Well, that's what I guess I was trying to clarify. Yeah, because we use MSI today we run Porter in Azure Container Instance, and we have it set up with managed identity. And I guess the only place we're really using it is probably it is the Key Vault storage plugin. So we secure it that way. I don't know if and actually I wonder if the Mixins use that identity, but like you said, we just rely, some of our stuff is written in .NET anyway, so it's relying on that default credential feature that you just mentioned.
Go has the same thing for doing its like good to go SDK that supports that too.
Yeah, so I guess if your plugin, but yeah, I guess if the plugin doesn't have that, the plugin would have to have code written to support the same, something similar to the way that the secrets plugin supports it.
Yeah, so the Azure plugin already has this implemented, but I got to remember how the storage plugin gets invoked is that might just be baked into Porter and we're just using it. And I'll look into that. I'll take an action item to figure out how managed identity and let's see.
Okay.
I have just a question, or I don't know if you're still going around the table, Sarah, for
Yes, of course. Yeah, go ahead.
It's something that came up when we were just I haven't done a lot of research on it yet, but a sister team of ours was like doing things to like have like a SDK like experience, a little bit of a wrapper around Porter, I guess.
Okay.
And they run the linters, I mean, the built-in linters for Porter. And then they were saying, you know, we're writing these, we're creating some of our own mixins. Is there a way to run the linter on the mixins? And I think the answer is no right now. But I don't know if this has ever come up. Like if I'm a Mixin author and I want to just have the linters run against the mixins also, is that something that's ever come up? Does anyone have
No.
thoughts on that?
There is, each
There's-
Mixin can have a lint command. I saw that
Is
somewhere,
it
but I
there?
don't think anyone does it yet.
Oh,
I
it's
don't think
there.
the
It's there.
security one
Okay.
is updated.
Okay.
Is
So
it in
if I-
Skeletor?
No, it's not there. Not in Skeletor.
Okay. So
It is. There is something in the linter when I worked on that where it tries to call the Mixin with the lint command, and then it just handles if it doesn't.
okay, that makes
call.
sense. I was wondering that, like maybe it just turns around and calls the mixins. So you're saying it is doing that there?
Yes.
Okay.
But we
So-
don't have any examples on it, so as far as I know, there's a test for it.
That's awesome. I'll check that out because that's cool. It makes sense that it might try to do that. Or, you know, but then I would have to maybe just implement like a lint API or something in my Mixin or some kind of API. I guess that would be called by Porter, I imagine.
Yeah, I can't remember the details here, but for sure we need to do some documentation. I can look into that
Well, if you do, but I mean, that pointer is great. Yeah, I hadn't had a chance to research the code, but you're saying it's in there, it's calling the Mixin. So I can,
yeah, it's
I can take
calling the Mixin command and then with the lint sub command. I
nice.
cannot remember how it expects to receive it.
Wow,
Okay.
you're right. This does exist. This is
I-
crazy.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
but I
think if you
haven't
look
seen it documented anywhere. Actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe some of the existing Mixins don't do it, but I think we were thinking we'd want to try to add that to some of the Mixins we're creating. So that's awesome. So I'll also look into it, I guess. If you find anything, send it along, but I'll also do some research on it.
I think if you look at the MR I posted, the one file I edited just before I put my edits in, I think that's where it happens. Because what Kim's saying rings a bell for me as well. I'm sure it's in that file, which is to do with linting the Porter YAML and specifically looking at the mixins.
Okay. Yeah. The one that you shared earlier?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, I'll check
It's in
that
that
out.
linter go file.
Yeah. Here's the test for it. It's like I just searched Mixin lint throughout the repo on GitHub. There's like little trails of it. Like it is like you can do porter Mixin lint and like as a sub command of porter Mixin. I don't know how fleshed out it is, but it is there. At least the scaffolding is there.
Yeah,
So
well, that's
easy
good.
to build
So
upon.
it can be built on if it's necessary. Okay. That's
Exactly. Okay. Anyone else have items they'd like to bring up? I think Troy, you have something.
Sorry, I was trying to get off mute. Yeah.
You're good.
So we've been doing this PR for like the last 3 meetings. It feels like it's never getting in. But yeah, I think the reason why it works so well with the Porter Argo demo is because when you deploy everything together, they share the same Porter config. So basically, you can't create the controller with it. So this issue before you do an installation, right? I think we lay down a Porter config into the namespace that the Porter operator is built in. And then we need that same config so the gRPC server can kind of like control the state. So there's no installation until you create one. And what I was trying to do is create the deployment with the Porter config that matches the Mongo store that we use when we deploy this, which is still a feasible option to do. It's just it would be created dynamically. It's just the point that Stephen brought up. I think we want to be able to change that backend store to something different if we don't want to use Mongo, and that has to be promoted through each installation or something to that degree. And I think what I'm trying to get at is that I can keep this the same, but then just deploy the same Porter, use the Porter config that we're using with the installations. But you don't get that. I think you don't get that until the installation's there, right? Like we don't, and I'm not quite familiar with the Porter config and how the agent config and how the operator is using that for the installation and the outputs. So I'm trying to understand that so we can get this PR merged, because I think we've gone through like 3 different iterations of this where we've changed how we were doing it.
Steven, you chose the worst time to walk away.
Yeah, I know. I had a somebody who's fixing my car just showed up, so I had to step away and get them all squared away. But I think I know the gist of what you're talking about. You're just saying like what I commented in the PR, Troy.
Yeah, basically, and like the path to resolution, because like I can use the porter config that's with the namespace, but I don't want to assume that that's always going to be there, and that's the right config we're needing to with the installation that's necessary for the gRPC server to connect to.
Right. So the critical thing is the gRPC service, the server that we're running inside of the porter like operator, it has to have the config that the installations were created with so that it can resolve the outputs against those installations.
Right.
Like we had this initially, we had it to where you could have like named porter configs, and you could even do like a porter config per installation, and that just was way too wieldy. So now there's this hierarchy of like resolving porter configs where if there's a porter config set at the same namespace as the operator, the default namespace, then that's what is used by default. So like it says your main porter config. If that's not there, then it'll look, or maybe I'm backwards on this, but it'll look in the namespace that the installation is being deployed into and use that porter config. But there's only one porter config allowed per installation. You can't have multiple porter or per namespace. You can't have multiple porter configs in a namespace. If there is no porter config, then it uses the operator default porter config, which resolves to a Mongo instance that's spun up inside the cluster, right? So like this is the fallback. If there's nothing else externally referenced, then it'll use the internal porter config. But so like when the gRPC service, or when I guess the way to do this would be when an installation is created, the operator is going to automatically resolve the porter config that it will use for that installation. It's just called resolve porter config. And what porter config are we using? It'll then probably need to check, do we have a gRPC service that can handle this porter config for fetching outputs when this is done? And if not, then it'll probably need to kick off that gRPC service and say, hey, here we go. Here's the service that will handle any installations that are created with this porter config. That's kind of my thinking on this.
So yeah, so I would have to do that within the installation creation of, or within the creation of installation. What I'm worried about with that is the scaling opportunity, because if people have 5 installations, are we going to have 5 gRPC services that map to that installation?
No, we're going to have, it'll be an installation or a gRPC service per porter config. So you
porter config.
5, like if you had 5 namespaces and each one of those namespaces had their own porter config, then you would need to have, so either we have a gRPC service per porter config, or we have a single gRPC service that's able to resolve against multiple configs. That would require a change in porter itself, though.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's the right way to do this. Like these are pretty cheap resources in Kubernetes to run, so I don't think it's a concern for like overloading the cluster. It's just per namespace, you would potentially have a gRPC service running to resolve outputs against that namespace.
That's fair. And I think that one-to-one relationship will actually help people understand why it exists, because they need, yeah. Okay, because what I didn't want to do is clearly the opposite, right? Like just create this massive gRPC server that's going to resolve everything everywhere all the time. No. Okay. Yeah. So I know a way forward. I can't do it before the operator starts like I was doing it. I would have to do it on an instantiation of a creation of an installation, which will then So, okay, so I don't know if it's better for me to just close this and start a new one, because this is going to be a lot of mess when I refactor this to where it needs to be. And if everyone's okay, I think you're the only one, you and Brian are the only people that are probably going to review it. But if you're okay with that, we've had this discussion. I can make notes in the PR to try to explain what I'm doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And if we need to close it and start over, then that's totally fine. The other thing, in maybe instead of on the creation of a new installation, it's the gRPC service is created on a new porter config. So like when the operator spins up, it starts its own storage, its own Mongo service for its backend, right? Like it has its default. And so maybe we spin up the default gRPC service that will handle outputs in that porter config, which is just the operator default porter config, which that's just set. And then when you create a new porter config, then you just spin up a gRPC service alongside that porter config. So that porter config can either be in the operator namespace, and that's your default for all that. Yeah, so that's what it is. If it's in the operator namespace, and that's your kind of catch-all, and then if it's in the individual namespaces, then that's going to be, for installations installed in this namespace, it'll use this porter config. So I think we could trigger it off the porter config resource instead of off the installation resource.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then it would be sitting there, and then if they don't provide a porter config, it'll basically just resolve to the default one that already exists wherever that is. Yeah.
The resolve porter config code works pretty well. Like that's pretty straightforward. So it's just a matter of when do we kick off the gRPC service to handle the porter config, and that's where we need to map these two. It's not installations that really care about it; it's porter configs, because that's where the backend data is stored, right? So that's the gRPC service just as a proxy layer between an installation and a porter config backend, essentially.
Okay. Yeah, I think I got what I need. And bandwidth wise, I'll see if I can try to get something. If not, it's not gonna be tomorrow, clearly. But hopefully like early next week, if I can get it something by like Tuesday, Wednesday.
I think, and maybe we, what's the rush on this specifically? Are we trying to get this into 1.1, or should we just, like, this is something we need to get into before KubeCon?
That is a good question.
What do you two want?
I think this needs to be a pre-KubeCon thing, and I would like to have a little more time to probably test this out, integration tests around it. I can handle some of the integration stuff if you want that, Troy.
Can you two, what's the word I want? Can we cut a 110 for the operator with whatever we have, as long as that's kind of, or like,
yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, you should probably cut now, and then you can have that be included with whatever is involved at this point, and then create the milestone for pre-KubeCon to be this feature enabled. Because I think the only lift, it would just be uplifting like the porter agent that's now, I think, 1.1 that we're using. So and then all the features, all the things that still work, still work in essence.
All right, I think all you have to do is make a tag in an operator and it'll kick off. So if we can just do that really quick. But yeah, that should work. And the rest of it can be 120. We'll throw it in the 120 milestone or backlog. Cool. I think we have, does anyone else have anything before we do wrap up?
I had one more thing I wanted to talk about. It's the Terraform Mixin update, and this is going to come back to the OpenTofu stuff as well. I've got a PR, a WIP PR around adding in multiple directories where you can store different Terraform plans, if you will, whatever they're called, where there's a whole directory. So that all works. The issue is that if you can set at the top level a default Terraform directory but I'm not seeing that actually working. And I'm not seeing when Porter calls the actions for its plugins, I'm not seeing it pass along the Mixin config along with that. So I haven't had a chance to look into that yet. That was going to be my next thing, is to make sure that when we call an action, we're passing along the Mixin config as well, because we need to know if you didn't specify a directory, what directory am I executing this out of? And I'm not seeing that behavior now. So is anyone familiar with that part of the code? If not,
I think you'd have to check in the copied temp CNAB to see if it's stored in there in a file. But I don't think we like parse it at runtime. I think we talked about this. I'm pretty sure Mixin config is only parsed and handled at build time, not runtime, and actions are runtime. So if you want that information, you could see if it's copied into temp CNAB in that container.
See if what's copied into temp CNAB.
Like if like the Mixin config and probably more data would be stored into temp CNAB, because like we store like bundle.json and things like that into that temp CNAB dir. And we have like a /mixins actually that gets copied into there. So there might be like the Mixin config as like a JSON file stored there. But I don't think in the code we parse the Mixin config at runtime. I think it's only passed through at build time.
So, I mean, is that something we need to do? I don't see how this has ever worked if it can't resolve, like if you use a non-Terraform default name for your directory.
We would copy the dirs. So my like historical context is Mixin config was parsed at build time to grab the client version that we're going to pull and then copy any directory specified into that container image. And then the Mixin itself would handling like change during and like things like that as needed to like go to the specified file that like we wanted to like Terraform apply.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what it is now. It's just the behavior is not what I would expect. So
can we no, because you want to specify dir per action.
Like you have the option to, right? If you specify the
Yeah.
dir per action, then this works just fine. It's when you don't when you have a non-default Terraform directory name, and then you try to run the action, there's a hard-coded default of Terraform in the Mixin, and that's what it ends up resolving against.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you can no, because you're pulling I don't know. I need to think about it. We need to like debug this and see it and work through it. I think you just need I think there's a way to solve this, but it needs to be a two human effort, like someone else to like help be rubber ducky.
Your next available porter time. Let's try to get a couple hour working session, and we should be able to hammer this out.
Yeah, I'll schedule some time on your calendar. Cool. And also like if anyone else is on this call and they have an issue they want to tackle, they have something that they want to work on and they don't want to do it alone, or they just want like someone to come help, please reach out to your local homegrown maintainers. We are happy to help. And so I think we have a lot of great issues for 1.2.0. I would really think, I don't know the complexity or the amount of time it's going to take for like the identity stuff. That would be super amazing to get in for KubeCon. Huge hype right there. But I think we have like at least a really cool way going forward for 1.2.0. I know we specified last call that like 1.2.0 was going to focus on documentation and like revising that. So if you want to do something a little bit easier, a little less codey, and I won't say documentation is easier. I think it's actually harder. But if you want to do documentation work, we have it. Sound good? Okay. Thank you all for your time today. I'll see you in 2 weeks and have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers, guys.